Please join me in welcoming Quint Studer to the stage.
Well, thank you. Okay, everybody turn that way. They've been looking at your back this whole time. Say hi to all the Zoom people. There you go. Reminds me, years ago, I was speaking, and I was real rushed to get my hair cut. So I went to a cost cutters, and I was speaking, and I always do a survey after each day, because you can make corrections day 2. And so after the first day, I'm in my hotel reading these surveys. And the person goes, it was really a nice talk, but whoever cut your hair really did a bad job. So I started looking at my hair, and it was just unbelievably bad. So I remember that whole next day I did an entire workshop making sure my back never went to the crowd everywhere I would go and so on. So it's really nice to be here, and I appreciate that. I'm very supportive of healthcare administration programs. I'm very fortunate I was asked to be on the board of AUPHA, which Dan is here, and we are board members together, and then Dolores with Cammie. I used to give away at every AUPHA national conference 3 talks by me. So if you wanted to, you could put your business card in a bowl, and then you'd pick it up, and then I'd come to your college to talk. And I'd pay for the airfare, everything. It was no cost. And it was pretty neat. One time I think even got traded, where somebody had me talking, and they traded me for something else, like a book or something like that. But I got to speak here years ago, and it was really wonderful to be back. And what a great program. One of only 6 that still has residents, which I think is so vital, because I think we're all looking for is safety, a safe place to share our inside with our outside, a safe place to say what we don't know. I'll talk a lot about my personal history. I love therapy. How we have a rough time getting people into therapy in healthcare. We really do. And tomorrow I'm talking a lot about how to increase utilization of mental health services. We have some of the greatest resources in healthcare of any industry. We have occupational health, we have employee wellness, we have EAP programs, we have apps. I was at Baylor Scott White last week, and they have unbelievable resources. And then the question is, and they were very open about it while I was there, is only 1% of their people use them. So I've always been really open about my own struggles, because it's just something I am. That's who I am. But I will tell you, I really like therapy. I really do, because I love talking about myself. And when you think about people that you ever know anyone that likes talking about themselves? Yeah, they're called CEOs. Anyway, and everybody's real nice. We think everybody enjoys it because we're the CEO. I've had CEOs say to me, I talked. I didn't think it was that good, but I asked the staff, and they thought it was really good. So said you could throw up, and they tell you your thrust of vomit was good, something like that. So, so for a guy who likes talking about himself, being in therapy is unbelievable. I never met a couch I didn't want to lay on. I remember, and if you're in therapy, by the way, you still ironically hold off the big stuff till the end of the therapy session. There's always a big gulp thing you want to share, but you're not sure, so you want to slowly share it. So I remember I was with Bob Long at Crossroads Counseling Center. We were about 55 minutes into this session. We got 5 minutes to go, and I say, I'll throw it out. So I throw this thing out, and I said, well, we'll have to talk about it next time, Bob, because my hour's up. He said, good news. The person after you just canceled. Let's keep going. So one of those things. So anyway, let me walk through, and I guess the message to me, you've talked about angels. We've all got angels. We might not call them angels, but we all have angels. We all have mentors. The student is ready, the teacher appears. And that's really what I have found. And the other message is we're all pebbles in a pond of life. And I'll close with, hopefully, if I forget, Dan, tell me. If you ever heard me talk, I tell half a story, then I go on some wild venture. And then later on, so I got to finish that story anyway. And Vincent, by the way, like meeting you, and I agree with what she said, how lucky she is to have all of you spouses. I almost wish Rishi was watching, my wife, so I could throw some, let her know. I got to tell you, though, I'm on a plane one day, and this woman's next to me, and she's so excited to see her husband. And I'm wondering, I wonder if my wife is excited to see me as she is to see her husband. So I asked her, I said, what does he do that gets you to do this, feel like this? She said, well, I'm on the road a lot, and the night before I come home, he calls me and tells me he just wanted to hear my voice. I said, that's good. I mean, come on. Some of you ladies are liking that already, aren't you? Yeah, I saw it. Then I said, oh. And then she said, in the morning, when I'm going to come home that day, he calls me and tells me he can't wait to have me in his arms again. I mean, I could barely stand it, waiting for that plane to land. It landed. I got onto the, where you can get on your phone. And I said, Rishi, I just wanted to hear your voice, and I can't wait to have you in my arms again. She goes, who told you to say that? I mean, you guys were good. You were good. And she's tough. I don't know if you know that. She's tough. You try getting her in a room. Remember, I was trying to get you guys in the room. It was a tough deal there. So, but we all are so lucky to have people that support us. So let me walk through a little bit of my journey, because we're all going to be on a journey. And nobody goes through life undefeated. And that's really the message. So what do you do when life gets in the way sometimes? In my book, Hardwiring Excellence, one of my mentors was Fred Loop. Fred Loop's the president of Cleveland Clinic. And I loved Fred Loop. He always had time for me. And one time before I left the hospital, I would meet with him. And he always wanted to talk about before I left. And one day he didn't meet with me. It was so unusual. So I flew back to Pensacola. That night I got a text or an email from Fred, can't remember which one, and he apologized. And he said his best friend was dying. Actually, it was Al Lerner. The story, that's one of his best friends at Cleveland Clinic. And he said, I spent the last 6 hours holding my best friend's hand. He was always there for me. And then he closed with, sometimes life just gets in the way. Does it really get in the way, or does it help us? So let me tell you a little bit about my story and your story, because you know what's really neat about the faculty here? How the faculty feels so good about the students. And it reminds me so much of when you read about great people that teach actors and actresses, and most of their actresses and actresses will achieve something they'll never achieve. They'll get an Oscar that they never got. Yet when you talk to them, they're as excited or more excited about somebody they mentored winning the award of themselves. I own 2 minor league baseball teams, a single A team in Beloit and a double A team in Pensacola, Florida. Most of the managers and the coaches, they also wanted to make the major leagues, but many of them never made the major leagues. Only 5% of people that play minor league baseball ever make the major leagues. One of the Pensacolians was the manager of the New York Mets, Buck Showalter. Never made the major leagues. But if you talk to some of these managers and coaches that never make the major leagues, they're so excited about young players they had touched that make the major leagues. And I think that's the magic of life. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm going to have 40 years of sobriety this December, God willing. And they have sponsors if you're in recovery. You have sponsors that are mentors. You ask them things that you're afraid to ask anybody else. You share your secrets with them. In essence, they're no longer a secret. I remember one time scared to death to tell this person something. I was disappointed in myself because, again, there's no perfection here. And I called him up and I shared it with him. And I said, and I know you're only as sick as your secrets. And he said, yeah, but let me explain something. It's no longer a secret. And I remember telling my sponsor, it was so wonderful. That's why I started the Studer group. I was scared to death. I was president of a hospital. I started out as a special ed teacher. I don't know if anybody knows this, but presidents of hospitals make more money than a special ed teacher. Like quite a bit. And here I'm 48 years old. I still got 2 kids in high school. And I'm going to quit it. And I had one speaking engagement, and I was scared to death. I remember asking my sponsor, I was like a spiritual guide, and I told him that I have this thing about starting this company because I felt like I had I guess I wouldn't call it that, but now I call it a calling. But I was scared. I was scared of giving up security, giving up something guaranteed for something completely unguaranteed. And how are we going to feed the family and things like that? Because I will tell you, if you're a recovering alcoholic, it isn't like you've been saving money until you got into recovery. You dig in. I had 6 years of debt I had to dig out of when I quit drinking. I had a lot of stuff I had to clean up. So you're always pretty far behind. So what happened was he told me to read a book, and he told me to read a chapter. I think it was by Emmett Fox, and it was about the power of constructive thinking, and it called about awareness. And it told the story about this gentleman was out in the yard with his daughter, and his daughter was thirsty. It was called The Heart Aroused. And his daughter said to Dad, "I'm thirsty." And the father saw the hose, gave the daughter the hose, turned the water on, and she was holding the hose. And all of a sudden, she was drinking the water. And all of a sudden, she said, "There's no more water." And he looked at her and he said, "Take your foot off the hose." And what he was trying to tell me is maybe my foot was on the hose. And I always used to say to Norm, I have a picture of him. Next time we're on the phone, I have a picture of him right next to my computer. He's deceased now. I said, "Norm, thank you." And he'd say, "Here's the one thing you and I will never agree on is who should be thanking who." It's pretty miraculous, and I want to thank you today. Let me tell you another little story. About 8-9 months ago, I went to the doctor because I had a little thing on my head, and I was afraid it was like skin cancer. And he told me the good news that it's basal, and they cut it off. And it actually was an advanced practitioner. And she said, "Would you like me to look at the rest of you?" Normally, I'm in a real hurry. I'm always in a rush to go somewhere, even when I have nowhere to go, if you know what I mean. I'm in a grocery store and there's a line. I'll walk around, and I could have just stood in that line in the first place. And she said, I said, "Sure." And she looked at me, my back, and all of a sudden she said, "This is really concerning." She said, "I'm going to take this and send it to pathology." And, I left, and I was scared, but I sort of forgot about it. And then I'm on the road. I'm in Dallas at the airport, and I get a phone call about 10 o'clock on a Friday, and they said, "I just want you to know you have a malignant tumor, and it's melanoma, and you need to get it now." And I'm with this person named Nicole who works for me, like an angel. And she sees me just go, whew. And 10 minutes later, I get a call from Lisa, who's one of her friends who's had melanoma, to start walking me through. That's playing offense instead of playing defense. Sometimes we don't want to step on toes, but are we really stepping on toes? Or are we telling somebody we love them, somebody we care about them? One of our speakers at Studer Group was Beth Keane. Beth Keane always told the story called Spinach in Your Teeth. I remember Beth well. One of my books is dedicated to Beth. She died of breast cancer. And I went to see her as she was close to death, and she was writing letters to her 4 sons to give to the grandchildren that were not born yet. And she just wanted them to tell her how much they love them. Well, if you go online and go Beth Keane, Keane, you'll be able to watch a video, and it's 8 minutes, spinach in your teeth. And she says, when we love somebody, we tell them if they have spinach in their teeth. So it's sort of an amazing thing. So in essence, though I didn't have spinach in my teeth, she could have just paused and said, "I don't want to interfere." So as Lisa called me. So I go to the doctor, and he did, a lot of, I've written things that I've created stuff I don't even like anymore. I'm tired of Ate It. Anyway, no, I hate Ate It. I say, no, I'm tired of some of my own stuff, you know what I mean? People took it literally. When I started rounding, and we've rounded, Steve, it was just to have a relationship. Next thing you know, there's 11 questions, a checklist, and software. How can you build a relationship up when you're checking checklist and filling out software? But sometimes people in good intentions in healthcare just take something that was simple and make it more and more complex that you can't even execute the thing. Can't even do the thing. So anyway, my doctor did aid it. Let me tell you how he did it, because I think it's pretty cool. And he didn't even know he was doing it. So I go in to see the surgeon, and he sits me down. My wife's with me. Get real emotional, excuse me. And he says, when you heard you had melanoma, what's your first thought? When you had he used that word cancer, which I just don't like. And I said, I'm going to die. He said, well, it doesn't have to be that way. And then he showed me the stage, which wasn't great. Showed me the stage. And so he explained it. So he basically reduced my anxiety in a way, but I'll tell you what he really did magically at the end. So if you read my columns, I hope you all sign up for my columns. They come out every week. You can get them mailed to you. My one last week was, why don't we just ask somebody, what's your biggest worry? Maybe that's all we need to do, in a way. University of Colorado did a study, and they asked patients waiting in the ER, what's your biggest worry? And then they went and didn't tell, they didn't tell the clinicians what the biggest worry was. Then after the patient was treated, they asked the clinician, what did you think the biggest worry was? And they only got it right 23% of the time. Maybe we should ask, what's your biggest worry? So that's what he said to me. It was dying. In the book, The Wonder Drug by Steve Tasiak, they tell a story with the study that a woman went to the emergency room, 3 months pregnant, bleeding vaginally. And then they asked her what her biggest worry was. Then they asked the doctor what the biggest worry was. And the doctor, of course, thought the biggest worry was losing the child. You know what her biggest worry was? Depression. She says, I've struggled with suicide thoughts and I've struggled with depression. And I'm afraid if I lose this baby, I'm going to take my life. Two completely different worries, but sort of the same. But the treatment would be different, wouldn't it? So anyway, the doctor explained it to me. And then he told me duration, how long the surgery would take, how long the pathology would take. And then he did something that I really appreciated. He reduced my anxiety. Because you know what our job is as leaders, is to reduce anxiety. Sometimes it doesn't mean we can't be straight with people, but reduce the anxiety. Right now, 30 to 50% of clinical managers in healthcare have less than 3 years experience. What's their biggest worry? It's probably not age gaps. It's probably, how am I going to schedule today? It's probably, how am I going to keep somebody from leaving? Because I know how hard it is to get new talent. If my new material, which is really something, it's different. I got really frustrated. I love middle managers. If you're an executive, like you got to have great middle managers. Whoever has the best middle managers wins. And middle managers are in such a tough spot right now. They got so much squeezing on them right now. And then they have somebody quit. And then they hear this statement. Have you ever heard this statement? People don't leave their job, they leave their boss. It's not true anymore. I was in Houston and somebody said it, and of course you see some heads nodding, and I couldn't stop myself. I got up and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Because I saw middle managers that go, just go. You could see how sad they were. Because they don't want to lose someone. And then they hold up the mirror and they blame themselves, and then an agency comes in, and then the staff doesn't want an agency, then the cost goes up. It's a vicious cycle. I said, that's not true. People leave for all sorts of reasons, and they stay for all sorts of reasons, and some aren't in our control. I was in a small hospital in Alabama, and one of their nurses went to be an agency nurse because she wanted to get out of debt, and she could do it for about 6 months and then come back and be out of debt. How can you blame her? How can you blame her? So anyway, here's what the doctor did that was magic for me. So he knew I was scared. So when I was getting off the exam table, he came up to me, and he put his arms on my arms like this. He looked me in the eye and said, we're going to get through this together. Now, Mark Goldstein, who's a physician, who's an expert in suicide, has you do an exercise. And what you do is you think about a real tough time you were in, really hard, and you then, how'd you get through it? And you talk about how you felt. Now, this is a newer one, but if you've been through a divorce or if you've been through something, a lost job, how do you feel at first? You feel angry, feel sad, and you're a perfect example of what I'm going to talk about. You feel disappointed. You feel sometimes maybe like a loser. Who knows? But who wants to go through these? I'm working with a guy right now. His wife said, I want a divorce. He was going through all those things. All those things. Anger, depression, loneliness, frustration. And you did exactly what people do when they go through that. You did the right thing. So when the research shows how do people get through it, they call someone. You called your grandfather. They talked to someone. So when I got my cancer, I called Dan Gentry, first people I called. I called Fawn Lopez. Fawn and I, she's with Modern Healthcare. And Fawn said, oh, Quint, you'll figure out a way to help people. I'm thinking, Fawn, let's talk about helping me right now, okay? Before I'm helping others, let's talk me. You know, she's right. And we have to all reach out to people, and that's some of the hardest things to ask for help or say, I don't know. So she said, call Marsha Horn. I'll hook you up with Marsha Horn. Marsha Horn runs a not-for-profit called ICAN, I-C-A-N, out of Phoenix. She's a patient navigator for cancer patients. And I called her. And right away, she had all my tests come to her, which was a lot better than my experience. I have a lot of doc friends. So I got this report, and I sent it to a doctor at Mayo Clinic I know. He thought it was a friend of mine. He goes, oh, I feel so bad for this guy. And I'm thinking, it's me. So well, maybe it's not that bad. So she has me send her stuff, and then she says something pretty cool. She said, make sure they take this much tissue out, because we need to look at your genetics, your molecular structure, and do your treatment plan. Now, I will tell you, it's not what I wanted, but it allows me to have a treatment plan. So yesterday I did my immunotherapy, how I do it every 3 weeks, and I got a story on that one. When I sold my company, people ask, what do you do with your money? Well, I built a hospital. Why not? I built a children's hospital in Pensacola, Florida. And then I built a Y, pretty cool. And then Baptist said, well, you're doing that for Sacred Heart. What are you going to do for us? So my wife and I built them a brand new infusion center. Now, I'm not going to that infusion center. So I'm going to another infusion center. So I go to this other infusion center, and I'm in the dumpiest room you can possibly imagine. I'm in this dump of a room while they're giving me my immune therapy. I'm skeptical. I don't think that's the real room. I think they found this crummy room, said put him in there, then he'll buy us a new room. So anyway, I talk about that because my worry was, what if people won't let me come speak? What if people shy away? What if people won't utilize me? My replenishment is this. We all have different replenishments, and that's what I'm going to talk about. My replenishment is helping. I wake up every morning and I say a few prayers, and one of them is to take away anything that keeps me from being helpful. Here's what you all have in common, and on Zoom too. Your DNA calls you to be helpful. That's a great thing, but it can have a downside. It can have a downside, because sometimes we're so helpful to others, we don't take care of ourselves. We're notorious for it. But your DNA calls for you to be helpful. Your DNA probably brought you into healthcare. And look how young you are, and you thought of healthcare. It was just Halloween. I was talking to doctors in Tallahassee Tuesday, Capital Medical Group, and we went around and I asked them, how old were you when you thought about being a physician? The guy answered 7. They're running around as doctors on Halloween. People run around as nurses on Halloween. People run around as police officers, firefighters, and teachers. You know why? People that enter the helping profession, it's in their DNA. So let me go back and move through a little bit of stories and connect into the pebble in the pond. And like you said, now I love the way you said when one door closes, another one opens. That's not how I heard it. They said, Quint, when one door closes, another one opens, but it's hell in the hallways. And isn't it sometimes a little bit hell? You don't know? So a little bit about me and the angels in my life, and then I want you to think about the angels in your life. I want to think about the people that are touching you right now. And don't underestimate saying thank you. Don't let them know that they're making a difference in your life, because you don't want to ever leave any unfinished business. Some of you asked me to sign your book, and I wrote love. I told you I loved you. Sorry. Because one of my friends, John Meislick, died. It's in the book. And when he died, before he died at 54, and he said, Quint, tell people you love them. And ever since then, I've been telling people I love them. I tell people I love them. I saw Dan the other day. I said, I love you, Dan Gentry. He goes, I love you, Quint Studer. Anyways, so anyway, I'm hearing impaired. So let me tell you my first angel's rule. I'm hearing impaired. My first angel was a third grade teacher named Mrs. James. Because when you're hearing impaired, you usually lag behind in school because you're hearing impaired. I don't hear any jokes. Like everybody laughs. I have no idea why people were laughing tonight. I have to watch closed caption to know what they're saying. And even closed captions, Seinfeld just isn't as funny in closed caption, but it still is funny, I will tell you. So I'm sitting here and you're usually behind. I also have a speech impediment. It's very common when you have a hearing impairment to have a speech impediment. They go together. I have a little lisp. You just heard it. I sometimes stutter or stammer. I mispronounce words. Oh, gosh, because I can't do it. And when I mispronounce the words, I keep right on going. And I talk to some of the smartest people in the world. I talk to physicians all the time. They're very smart. When I mispronounce a word, I just keep right on going. And it's beautiful because I can see them looking around going, God, he's smart. I've never heard that word before. So my first angel was in third grade. I barely made it to third grade. I went on like 6 weeks past, and it was Mrs. James. And what did Mrs. James do for me? I felt loved. We were talking earlier. In my new work, I say what the key to any great culture is, help people feel they belong. Isn't that what we all want to feel? That we belong? How many first-year students are here? Wasn't it rough these first 30 to 60 days? It really is. 27% of people that quit something quit within the first 90 days. You know why they quit? Because they come in and all of a sudden they start realizing what they don't know. They compare their insides to other people's outsides. And all of a sudden they think they're all smarter than me. And they exit. It just happens. I have a whole video for new employees on don't leave. Don't leave. What you're feeling is sort of normal. What Mrs. James did for me, she knew I loved sports. So she brought in the Chicago Tribune sports page. And she'd always meet with me privately, and she taught me how to read through the sports page. I also got very good in math. ERAs, things like that, batting averages. My sixth grade teacher was Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry liked me. I could tell because he put my desk right next to his. We co-taught the entire sixth grade. Now, I have my old report cards, and I think he did that because of fourth and fifth grade. He said, disruptive, bothers neighbors, never sits still, gets out of his desk. You know what he figured out? I'm going to put him next to me. And he kept me busy all the time. Kept me busy, and then he did some magical thing. My mother hated parent-teacher conferences. If your kid's not doing well in school, when the teacher called, it's sort of like I have 5 kids, and I tell people, you have 5 kids, there's always an outlier. When the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Department calls you, it's not to compliment you on your child. It's not to say, are we having a good time in the parking lot tonight? Why don't you join us? So my mom didn't like these parent-teacher conferences because of anxiety. And she came home and she woke me up. She said, Mr. Fry likes having you in class. Says you got a lot of energy. Just got to keep it pointed in the right direction. See? He saw what was right instead of what was wrong. It's looking at what's positive, not negative. And in healthcare, it's tough. Because see, in healthcare, we live in a world where we're going to gear toward what's wrong instead of what's right. Stephen Covey, in his 7 Essential Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about we have deposits and withdrawals. In healthcare, you get a lot of withdrawals. I'm sure when Florida Blue calls you, they don't say, hey, just want to let you know we're going to increase your rates. How you feel about that? Yeah, it's just the way it is. How about some of you? Think about it. If you have a boss or a faculty member and you get a text says, can you call me? Is your first thought, oh, good, here comes reward and recognition? No, that's why most of my work is looking at what's right. Sure, we want to look at what's wrong. It takes 3 to 5 compliments to every 1 criticism for somebody to feel good about another human being. I had a good time with the physicians in Tallahassee. I said, hey, when you get a call from the pharmacy, it's to tell you, hey, good job ordering, doc. If you really want to mess up people in your job or here at school, there's a way to do it. All you do is call facilities and engineering. Just call them up. Say, temperature's good. Not too hot, not too cold. They'll be urine screening you by the end of the day. Whoa, what do we got here? Because we're more likely to tell what's wrong instead of what's right. Yet we got to look at what's right. Mr. Fry saw what's right. I went to a big high school in Illinois, 5,300 kids. Big. Went out for soccer because I wanted to be an athlete. And I got so lucky, I got a guy named Coach King who had been a missionary in India. So I learned how to play soccer. And he didn't cut anybody. My type of coach. No cuts. And I played my freshman, sophomore year for Coach King. Junior year I went out and I was cut right off the bat. I got a call from Lee Benesack my senior year, because I didn't play my junior year. And he said, Coach King wants you to come out for soccer. I said, Coach King's the sophomore coach. He goes, no, he's the new varsity coach. Told me to give you a call. Changed my life. Made me feel welcome. Made me feel like I belonged. Coach King knew how to compliment you without hurting you. That's another technique of a leader. How do we give somebody criticism, but do it in a way that you don't devastate them? I'd go over and miss the soccer ball, and Coach King would go, good job, way to hustle. Nice job, way to get over there. Next time, put your foot out a little earlier. But you really did a good job getting over there. That's the difference. I can tell you who has good coaches and who have bad coaches. Because good coaches create self-confidence, bad coaches take it away. So now, here's another angel. So anyway, I go to college, and I don't know what to major in, so I'm undecided. And then they say, you have to pick a major, you're a junior. What do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a teacher. Just like Mrs. James, Coach King, Mr. Fry. They said, what type of teacher? I said, high school. I like pep rallies. That's my whole choice. And they said, what do you want to major in? I got scared. Because see, I also can't spell. So if you can't spell, how can you teach? But see, Coach King let me come into his study halls. Let me come into his study halls and work with his students, and he was a special education teacher. So that's what I did for 10 years of my life, a special education teacher. And I can tell you all sorts of stories how it prepared me, because you diagnose, you set high goals, and it's good stuff. But, guys, I also had a drinking problem. So when I was 31 years old, I crashed. 2 divorces, lots of debt. Somebody classified, I don't think this was a compliment. She said, you're a hot mess. I like the hot part, and the mess part I was wondering about. So I had 2 choices. One was to kill myself, which seemed to make a lot of sense, because that got me out of the way of all the pain I was causing. Or I could get help, and I got help. And that's when Reverend Huff changed my life. And he gave me hope, and I took some steps. You know who else changed my life? An EAP. 6 months before that, I'd gone to an EAP, and they had the audacity to give me the Minnesota Multi-Personality Inventory Test. And when I went back, they said, do you want the results? Who wants the results? They said, there's a 90% chance you're an alcoholic. You know what I thought? Whew. I got that 10% left, baby. And they said, well, we want you to go to talk to somebody who's in recovery. The guy called me. I thought they shared my information with me, knew so much about me. Didn't know a lot about me, knew a lot about the disease. When John Meislick was dying, one of my good friends who was a recovering alcoholic, his wife said to me, Quint, is it wrong to think alcoholism made him a better man? I said, recovery made him a better man. So, talked to this guy. He gave me a book, which I immediately hid. But 6 months later, I picked up that book, and all of a sudden it changed. I walked into the rooms of recovery, and I felt like I belonged. I felt like I was welcome. What a diverse group. Now, I tell you that story because you can save lives. Let me give you a story just recently. Here's a couple in one of my cultures of replenishment. I don't think in healthcare you say, how are you? Because people are going to all say what? Fine. So what we've been doing is saying this. Got this from a physician, Dr. Jay Kaplan. We all know a phone battery. And you say, if you were a battery right now, what would your charge be? And you hear 80, 60, 40. But one thing beautiful about healthcare, if there's 380s and a 40, the 380s want to help the 40. Sort of fascinating how that goes. But if you hear something low for a while, then you help them move into it. So I'd always done this table activity, works well, doing it in a facility. And this one table only had 2 people, the rest had more. So I went up to the table and I overheard, and I said, what's your battery? She goes, it's negative. I've never heard that. So break comes, I go up to her, I said, I'm so sorry it's negative, what's going on? She goes, everybody thinks I'm in recovery, because I was, and they made a big deal about it, but during COVID I relapsed. I don't know what to do. Do you know by the time I left that day, we had her back, getting in our arms of love? See, if I didn't tell that story, you don't have it. See, people enter us through our cracks, and sometimes in healthcare, we don't want people to see the cracks. We're afraid to think we're vulnerable. You mentioned vulnerability. Yet vulnerability is what connects. Authenticity is what connects. So that left my road, and I have lots of angels. Met my wife then, that I've been married now almost 37 years or something like that. That was miraculous. I knew her when I was drinking. In fact, I made a move on her. She wasn't impressed. And the whole situation, all these angels. I've had so many people touch me in healthcare, and sometimes I didn't know that it was a good thing. I interviewed for a job. I told stories about all the jobs I interviewed with and didn't get. Because everybody reads your books, they think you went this straight line. I was interviewing for my first president's job. The search firm said, it's you. They got 2, you went through the finalists, it's down to 2, but it's you. Board's gonna meet, and at 10 o'clock, we'll call you with the good news. Well, about 10:30, I'm getting worried. And at 10 o'clock, I get this phone call, or 10:30, and they said, I'm shocked, but it wasn't you. How do you feel? Same way. But see, if I would have taken that job, I wouldn't have got the next job. You just never know what your real fate is, except to have some faith and have it, because you're going to go through that. So a couple thoughts as I'll tell one story to wrap it up, but just a couple thoughts. People ask me, what's the number one advice you give to young people or anyone? I say, be kind to yourself. Healthcare people have a perfectionism in their DNA, and that makes it hard, because we're hard on ourselves. When we go home at night, we think about what we didn't do instead of what we did. We think of that one employee we couldn't reach. If you're a physician, you think of the patient that you wish you didn't have to tell that news to. We bring home the losses but don't enjoy the wins. So what I tell people is be kind to yourself. If I did a sort of a drawing of a healthcare person, they'd be in a ring and they'd be getting the heck beat out of them, and no one would be in the ring with them. So again, I love therapy. So now Amy Storm, and with Amy Storm, I move them around. Anyway, I'm with Amy Storm, and Amy is the one who really saved my life when I was coming out of this depression. I saw Reverend Huff, then I went to Amy Storm. And Amy Storm said, Quint, I notice when I give you a compliment, you deflect it. When I tell you something isn't a compliment, you let it in. You ever try complimenting someone in healthcare? Isn't it hard? You ever try complimenting someone else? It's hard. You say, you do a good job. And what do you say? I could do better. It's not me. I have to go around telling people, just say thank you. Just say thank you. So in my book, The Calling, I talk about be careful that we don't stop our own replenishment, because sometimes we are our own enemy. We filter out the positives, but let in the negative. And so that's in the book, The Calling. So as I wrap up, I'm going to tell a little story, Pebble in the Pond. So some of my stories my experience has been wild. So let me tell you my Fawn Lopez story. So I'm talking to Marsha Horn. So I'm getting treatment for cancer. And one Monday night, I get a call from an attorney. And he's got to be very happy right now, because he's the lead attorney in the opioid cases, and he just got a $15 billion settlement yesterday. And I'm going to tell his name, because he's not the one. His name's Peter Mouget. You'll read about him when you read about the opioid cases. But I know him, and he's doing a lot of great work for food deserts and helping food get to children, and I've been involved in the project with him. And he calls me on a Monday night, and I say, Peter, I got to tell you what's going on in my life. And I tell him. And then I said, if you know anyone with cancer, I know someone that could help them. He said, oh, gosh, I hope I never have to need that. It's Marcia Horn. That Thursday, I get a phone call from Peter Mouget. He's crying. This is this powerful attorney, and he's sobbing. His best friend's 17-year-old son's loaded with cancer. And while I'm on the phone, I said, let's see. I'm technologically, this is about all I can do. I put him on hold and hit this button, called Marcia. She answered. I connected them. And it was a tough case because the parents were divorced. They were at odds. They weren't talking. And it was a mess. She spent the entire weekend working with the mom and the dad to get them talking. And that Monday, she had that young boy up at UAB getting cancer treatment. And not that it's going to be what everybody wants, but he's responding quite well. And what I've probably now helped 9 to 10 people that I've run across, helping navigate them. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for me. Because see, they teach us even in recovery, the only way you keep it is to give it away. And you award winners, you know what you are? You're giver-awayers. That's what y'all had in common. He didn't spend all this time here. Did they pay him so real well? No. That's why they love you. That's why they love you. No, we don't. It's not about money. So that's the story about there's going to be angels in our lives. They're going to touch us. And we're not even going to sometimes know it till after they leave. We're not going to know it that they're touching us when they're touching us. And sometimes I truly believe when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I remember picking up, somebody said to me, have you read that book? I said, no, or I talked to a guy, I said, I love what you just said. Where'd you read that? He said, I read in a book. I said, you're kidding, I got that book. I wasn't in there. Right away, blamed the book. I went home, I'd yellow marked it, pink marked it, and dated it. So what was the difference that moment than other times before? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. So let me finish with the pebble in the pond. 1997, my oldest daughter is getting married. Her name's Becky. It's a June wedding. I don't know. I guess she wanted a June. In fact, I think she had the June wedding picked out before the guy. Okay, so it's a June wedding. She wanted to get married outside, which is fine, you know. She wanted a gazebo. Place she picked to get married didn't have a gazebo. I found out when you're the father of bride, it's unbelievable what happens. There's 3 S's you learn. Shut up, show up, and shell out. That's it. So we got this June wedding coming up. Now we have a gazebo. We've got a gazebo rented. It's going to be outside, which is sort of nice. My wife went up there early. I stayed back in Pensacola. So she's in Wisconsin because that's where the older kids stayed. She's getting married at St. Mary's Catholic Church. And so Friday was the rehearsal dinner, they call it. Rehearsal. So I fly up, I get there, with my youngest son comes with me, and we go to the rehearsal dinner. It's at the church, then we're going to the dinner. So my daughter Becky puts her arm through me, and now I get new information. She goes, Dad, the priest wouldn't let me get married outside until I got married inside. So right now, instead of pretending we're doing the vows, we're really doing the vows. I want to ask some questions. Can we get out of tomorrow? Is there a deposit? And then she says, don't tell anybody. So I go down this thing, they do the vows, then we go to the rehearsal dinner. Next morning I wake up, they're already gone. About 11 o'clock, my son and I go to the tuxedo place. Now, we got measured in Pensacola, but they called him into Janesville, Wisconsin. So we go to pick up our tuxes. If they would have said, can you tell me what color it is? I have no idea. They just told me to get a tux. They measure you. The only thing I got to pick out was my T-shirt, my underwear, and my socks. I didn't get to pick out my shoes. I thought I was a wimp for a long time. Oh, yeah, but one day I got done speaking, a guy comes up to me, looks at me like idolizing me. He says, you got to pick out your own socks? Yep, I sure did. So it's a 3 o'clock wedding. They told us to be there at 1 because they do photos, which I don't understand. If they're not supposed to see the bride, why are we doing photos? You know, this whole thing is real gimmicky thing. So anyway, I go there. While I'm there, I see there's a guy with a bird cage with some doves. So I'm looking for something to do, because I'm always walking. So I go up to my daughter. I said, would you like me to ask him to leave? Because obviously you don't want these birds at your wedding. She goes, oh, good. The doves have arrived. Why? Why would you have birds fly over your head when you're dressed so nice? And doves are sloppy. Let me tell you, they're like colorful pigeons, if you ask me. So I'm suspicious, because we're paying this dove guy. So I go up to him. I said, what? Tell me about the doves. He goes, well, when the minister says, now I give you Mr. and Mrs., I'll let the doves out. They'll fly over the crowd, and then they'll land here. I don't trust this. I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for that minister. And I tell you, when they get to that point where he goes, now I give you Mr. and Mrs., I never saw my daughter turn around. I'm like a duck hunting a blind, waiting for those baby doves to be released. They do two things and they come down. But now we move back a little bit. I'm at the wedding. There's 300 of us. We're outside. I've got this front row seat by this gazebo, and we're on the Rock River. And all of a sudden, some guys, probably in their 20s, are driving by. They're in a boat, and they look, and this is unbelievable. There's a new gazebo. There's 300 people, and there's a guy about their age getting married. They're concerned about this guy. Could he be in a hostage situation? So they have three options. They can either take the boat and go real slow on the outside, right? They can do a U-turn and come back later, or they can do option number 3, which they chose. Rev the motor up and just keep doing 360s in the river. And of course, if you've ever been there, people are acting like they're looking at the gazebo, bride and groom, but they're really looking at these boat guys. So he stops the boat and he gets up, the one guy, and goes, hey, it's not too late. We'll pick you up at the pier. I'm thinking it is too late. He got married last night. Now, I got to tell you, I grew up in the 60s. I'm sitting here at an outdoor wedding with a gazebo, with doves waiting to be released, with a daughter that got married the night before, with guys yelling out of a boat. I'm thinking I'm having a drug flashback right at my daughter's wedding. This is unbelievable, like an out-of-body experience I'm having. Well, then the minister, who is a priest, he's a renegade priest, because the priest can marry inside, we're married outside, we had to get a special priest. Anyway, so he's there, and he's doing the deal, and he walks to the front of the gazebo and says, now, he didn't say, now I give you Mr. and Mrs. He said, when you throw a pebble in a pond, how much water does it impact? I'm thinking, just like you're thinking, who cares? Let's get this over with, because I don't have a lot of patience. So he now walks down from the gazebo, walks around, and he's walking up and down the aisle. See, Zoom, how good I'm doing? Stefan, aren't I doing good staying in my little spot? Thank you. I need a lot of reward and appreciation. You can't over-recognize me, Stefan. It's impossible. You will run out of compliments before I run out of time. Anyway, so he's walking through the people, and I'm not giving this guy any eye contact because I'm afraid he's going to call on me. And he gets up and he says, if you throw a pebble in a pond, how much water did that impact? I'm thinking, who really cares right now? Now I look and I think, this could be a Q&A. He could call on me. So I'm literally trying to think, how big is the pebble? Because that had to have an impact. How deep is the pond? And I'm trying to think these things. And he says, when you throw a pebble in a pond, it impacts every bit of water in that pond. And then he said, if you're at this wedding, you're here for a reason. Even if you don't know the bride and groom, you know somebody that knows the bride and groom. So you're here for a reason. You're all pebbles, and you're pebbles in this pond that's touching this bride and groom. Well, I wasn't thinking about this bride and groom. If you heard me speak before that day, because I never mentioned Mrs. James. I never mentioned Mr. Fry, and I never mentioned Coach King, because I forgot about him. But all of a sudden at that moment, those pebbles in my life just came full force. And ever since then, I've been thinking of pebbles in my life. People that have touched me. because we're the luckiest people in the world, because we get people that love us, and we're the ability to love. And one of the beautiful things about being here is that sense of belonging. So that's my message. We live in a whole world of replenishment. Let's just take advantage of it. But the last thing is let people you know you love them. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Thank you.